Mr. Battle, how is yourself?
I'm okay. I'm just finished a dose of COVID,
Oh
so
God.
I'm still yeah, I'm still a little bit delicate after that. So you'll have to forgive me if my voice goes and I start coughing and stuff. But I'm not infectious. Not that that makes any difference to you
Yeah,
because there's a screen between us.
it's
But
true.
you
Pretty
could
safe.
get a virus through. You could get some kind of virus off my phone. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
it's like
okay. I'm okay though.
it's
You
like
know.
well, men are bad with most flus. Imagine what it's like with COVID. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty bad, all right. And I did the whole isolation thing as well for about 8 days, and that was the hardest part of it, really. Just
yeah,
knocking around in my bedroom because I didn't want my wife to get it. We decided it wasn't a good idea to get to deliberately infect her with a potentially dangerous virus. So I had to sequester myself in the bedroom for 8 days, which was, I mean, I didn't watch any telly, I didn't really. Anything. I just kind of sat there with my own thoughts for days on end, and it takes you to the strangest places. I'll tell you.
good Lord.
I'm a different person.
Like Jesus.
What's that?
You're like Jesus then arriving, after all self-isolation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's definitely oh, it's definitely a bit of a second coming. All right, this is my resurrection.
Yeah. Oh my God. Were you vaccinated as well? Or
Yeah, all vaccinated and boosted and all everything up to speed. But so yeah, you'd wonder what it would have been like now if I hadn't been vaccinated because it was a bit of a dose anyway. But
yeah,
I'd be afraid to think what it might have been like if I hadn't had any vaccines.
it's true. A friend of mine's had like both variants. And yeah, he's, he's vaccinated and everything, and he still gets them. And he's like, man, I feel like shit, man.
Really,
Yeah. But
he's had it twice, has he?
yeah, each version.
Was he all right? Was he?
Yeah, he's grand. It's funny though, because we need him to play drums sometimes too. So he's just not able for it. Like,
He had to play bass. Is that what you said?
he has to play drums, which is the worst. He'll just sweat it out of him, like, be grand.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, of course. Like 15 pints.
Oh Jesus. Yeah, he'll be dead after that. What was I going to ask you? So like, you've gigs coming up in May. How's that after all this time?
Yeah, it's good. It's kind of funny. Actually, thinking about COVID now, because I've had it, I'm thinking, God, imagine like being in full venues again is kind of
Yeah,
weird. Like I was in a full venue, so playing gigs will be good. I assume I will have immunity still at that point, but
yeah,
it's been such a long time because we were going to do gigs 2 years ago, like every other band, but they were cancelled. It's great. It's great to do. It really is good to do gigs. The older we get, the more irrelevant we become, the more serious. So, because when we were going full time as a band, we fill the back of a horse box in Ireland in terms of gigs. But ever since we broke up, we seem to have gotten more popular, which is an interesting way of doing things. But it's
sure.
great. No, it's really good because
I'm sure it wasn't that empty back in the day, was it? Or are you just adding to the legend?
I know it wouldn't have been that. I know I'm exaggerating, but genuinely, like when we did come back together to play a few gigs in around 2006, 2007, we were
Hmm.
very, very surprised by the reaction to it. We'd since we kind of we never really officially broke up, but since we all went our own separate ways, and the band was finished and all that, we didn't realize that there was actually we were gathering fans even in that time. We didn't know about that obviously until
Yeah,
we decided to just to throw a gig together at the Blue, and the interest in it was so we've been kind of doing it on and off ever since, just for the crack, because it's
yeah,
great fucking crack, and there's no pressure. It's just it doesn't. We don't need to sell records. We don't need to get chart positions. We don't need to get radio play. There's none of that bullshit pressure that you had to deal with when you were on a major label and you were
mm,
shitting yourself the whole time, hoping things were going to happen because you live in a world where it's all results driven. You have to sell tons of records and la 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 la. La. But so yeah, doing those gigs now is great because they require very little thought and anxiety. But it's a very different thing to when I was younger, we were doing this, for real and making records and,
Yeah.
having managers and touring and all that whole machinery behind you.
Yeah, it must be like a really awesome feeling. Like when you book gigs, they sell out, even to this day. That's like even after all these years, that must be a cool feeling. Like,
It's an amazing feeling, yeah. Because every time we put some gigs on, and they do sell out, you're expecting it not to happen, because we were so conditioned into the idea of not selling out gigs when we were doing this full time. That it's still hard to. We still have that kind of imposter syndrome, stroke kind of stylistic kind of idea that we'd play a gig and 30 guys and a dog would turn up. But that so we still have, that's still part of our DNA. So when we do gigs and they sell out, it still surprises us.
Maybe that was Zoom having a temper tantrum or something.
Better now, actually.
Yeah, I have a lot of editing to do.
Story of my life, man. That's what I do. That's what I do as well.
Oh yeah, what's that like being a radio man?
Working in radio.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like I'll tell you this, David. When I back to the band, when I was going around in the band and we'd be visiting every radio station, you could pull up to a town, you'd be playing a gig there that night. So you go to the local station, whether it was a local BBC station or wherever it was, and you'd meet you go in and do an interview and whatever,
Yeah.
And I always used to kind of envy people who were doing that, because I thought, bands come and go, but you guys are DJs and sitting there, it's a lot more secure. And I'm in one band. This could all blow up at any second. You just get to sit there and talk to different bands, and they come and go, and you still have your thing. But I've always had an interest in radio. I always, like, Dave Fanning was a massive influence on me.
Dave Fanning, legend.
Yeah, huge influence on me, and all the rest of the guys in Kerbdog, and the music he used to play. We used to record a show, listen to it, and he would. He would have been quite, in some ways, responsible for our musical kind of direction. And so I always, radio was always, and it was always on in our house. My parents always had the radio on. So to work in radio is, it's great, having had a career in music and then working in radio too. They're not the same. Thrills are not the same. You don't get the same vibe that you get when you play on stage and there's people stage diving all over the place.
Yeah.
But that stuff is better than sex, to be honest. And it is. But be able to work in a medium that, like, I'm not working, in an accountancy office or something like that, which is nothing wrong with that either.
No, it's just not your thing.
But at least I'm involved in something that is still related to one of the passions of my life.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, like, I think one of the first times I heard Kerbdog was on the radio. It was John Kenny, Sunday night.
Yeah, John Kenny would have been. The metal show with John Kenny.
We all used to tape it, like, the whole thing start to finish. Yeah.
It was 2 hours long, wasn't it?
Yep.
On a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And he'd play loads of thrash metal. He'd play all the genres of metal.
I was just getting into it.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I was just getting into metal and rock and stuff. So that came on just at the right time. And I just listened to all of it together, from, like, say, Kerbdog, or even he played Wilt, I think. And then, onto heavier stuff than that. So I got a dose of it all at the same time, which is cool.
Yeah, because he would have been playing like light, anything from kind of, Pearl Jam to fucking Napalm Death.
Yeah, I heard Cradle of Filth on that show.
Yeah, Cradle of Filth.
I was like, no.
I remember John Kenny came over. He came over to interview Soundgarden in London, and we happened to be staying in the same hotel, so he interviewed us as well at the same time, which was
nice.
Which is really cool. That was my first introduction to John Kenny.
That's class.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I love John. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Was he actually into the metal though? A lot of people have doubts.
He really, absolutely, he still is.
Nice.
He really is. Yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah.
Irish hero.
He's mega into his metal. Obviously, sport as well. Yeah. But Yeah, he was into that show in a very, very big way.
That's cool. It's missed. All of it is
Yeah,
really
it surely
like,
is. Yeah,
that like one slot a week that you as a rock fan are waiting for, be it like Headbangers Ball or whatever, you're just like, you're going to tape it, I'm going to wait for that moment because you don't have, like, you're looking forward to it, whereas now you can get anything at any time,
that's the
maybe.
thing. It's different times now, and that was in some ways the availability of everything now. Like I can listen to anything I want in 3 seconds. I can listen to it.
Yeah.
In some ways, that like I don't think it sounds old fashioned, but I think if you have access to everything all the time, the chase, the being introduced, the kind of the trying to find I don't know. It's that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And music, it's I don't know. It's hard to find your tribe in some ways now because everything is so fragmented that it's you don't go out and buy something on CD, bring it home, put it on, and sit there and listen to it 100 times in a row
before you realize
because everything is kind of cheapened. Like if you get Spotify, you've pretty much access to anything you want. And in some ways that just does take the magic away.
It does. And there's like a natural kind of how do I say it? Not treasure hunt really. Just see if you get an album from a band and you look at their thanks list and you're like, oh, I'll check out these bands here,
Exactly. Yeah. The credits are absolutely huge for me. I'd be sitting there, I'd read all the credits, every single person.
That's what actually it ties into one of my questions here is when I was looking through Sepultura's Chaos A.D, you're tanked on it. But like, is it true you recorded at the same studio at the same time?
Yes, we did. We kind of got to know them for a while, an intense piece of time. They were doing Chaos A.D, and we were doing our first album in a studio called Rockfield in Wales, really fancy studio, a residential place. So they were in one. There's two studios. They were in one building and staying there, and we were in the other building. So we used to spend a lot of time, playing football with them, and we'd have some similar tastes in music as well.
Yeah.
And that album that they brought out, Chaos A.D, in the end was fantastic. Like, that was the one that broke them big time. And that's why they did it.
It was just because like you have an insight into the making of one of the most important metal albums of all time, as well as Sepultura's one.
Yay!
No, I got that. Went well in my head. But no, it's just it's like you saw them say there when they were doing that, and then to see the album go off and do what it did. It's kind of an interesting position to see that from.
It was because you see that, these things do happen. You see people making records and then you see it coming out and it's selling in, I think I sold a few million copies,
Yeah, actually, on this wall right here, I have the cover framed.
Of Chaos A.D.
Chaos A.D, yeah. It's
a great piece. It's a fantastic record.
Like
a lot of the other stuff Sepultura did, I'm not as into because I think Chaos A.D kind of was a bit more alternative metal. It was a bit more like Helmet.
Exactly.
And that kind of sort of, there was a mathematical feel to the riffology on it. And less of the full on. There was more space on that record, which I think was why it sold and they became very, very big on the back of that one. And also the guy who produced that record as well, if you're into nerdy producer stuff, there's a guy called Andy Wallace. And he'd done Nevermind, Nirvana's Nevermind, and he'd worked on the Rage Against the Machine album. He had a Midas touch on taking sort of cult acts and making them commercially viable, which he did with Chaos A.D.
Which is class. See, when you recorded in that studio, was that your choice, or were the label say you can record here? So how did that come together?
It was it our choice? No, it was the producer's choice actually.
Oh, cool.
So he came over from Seattle. A guy called Jack Endino was his name.
Yeah.
And he actually produced the first Nirvana record.
Sweet. That must have blown your minds.
It totally blew our minds.
Yeah.
He came over to kill Kenny to meet us, and we played a few tunes for him there. So he was hanging out with us in Kilkenny, And so yeah, he picked the studio because they had big budgets at the time. I hadn't a clue what was happening. I was sure I was a young lad from Kilkenny. I hadn't a fucking clue, not a notion what was happening. And we found ourselves in this fancy studio. I think it was like £1,500 a day. And we had people, you're there and you have people, you have catering. There's people we had a full-time chef. We had, this amazing studio. The owner of the studio was floating around in a Rolls Royce. Sepultura were next door recording their album. I mean, a few weeks earlier, we were just sitting on the dole in Kilkenny wondering what to do with our lives. It's just fucking mad,
Yeah, it's a really funny story. Like, what was, when you started like gigging first before getting signed, what was that like the scene, if there was a scene?
There was a great scene, like in Kilkenny particularly. Like I'm older than you, but Kilkenny had a very, very it's less so now, but it was very much part, like, you'd say bands would come in, like therapy, for instance.
Yeah.
They'd play Belfast, Dublin, Kilkenny, and maybe Galway or something like that. Yeah. And then you'd have some of these bands coming through, which were, relatively big at the time.
Yeah.
Or emerging. And Kilkenny had everyone was in a band. Everyone was in everyone else's band. And everyone was really big into alternative music as well. Yeah. So there was a lot of bands. And so, it was a really good time around 1989, 1991, 92. They were brilliant years. And, a couple of other bands got signed out of Kilkenny as well, which 3 bands got signed. Us, a band called My Little Funhouse.
I know them.
They signed to Geffen Records.
Yeah.
For apparently ridiculous amounts of money in Los Angeles. And then there was Engine Alley, they signed to Island Records. Yeah, so 3 bands from a small town like Kilkenny signing deals around the same time. That was pretty fucking mad.
That's a bit mental, isn't it? What was the touring? What was the touring like for the first one? Yeah, do you recall?
It was good. Yeah, it was all brand new to us. In fact, we ended up doing a UK and a European tour of therapy for a fair bit of that one when they were, in Troublegum. That came out. So they were. That was their big moment as well. So we happened to be on the coattails of that. So we, it wasn't our crowd, but we were getting to pay to their crowd every night, and it was just like wild. You know what I mean?
I'd say, for a therapy crowd, I'd say listening to you wasn't too far of a stretch as well. So I'd say you would have gone down pretty well.
Yeah, it was perfect. It wasn't too far a stretch at all, and partied for a long time on that thing because we could, as we do. Sure, all we had to do was get up and play for half an hour. That's all we had, and that was our day's work done. And then you have the rest of the night to kind of just
mingle
immensely, mingled, took a bit of, go out into the crowd, pretend to try not to be noticed, and get a lot of love off that, hanging around the merchandise stand and all this kind of stuff. But awesome. There was great. There were great times, and they were also brilliant times because you bring out your first album. Before it, I think was our album even out at that stage? I'm not really sure. I think it hadn't come out, so the pressure is not on, to sell records and all of that. The penny hasn't dropped that this is a business. These are serious people who want to sell. They're investing lots of money in you, so you don't really get a sense of that. I don't know what happened there.
you just dropped out, and I was like, oh,
gone. Yeah.
But
what I was saying was, so none of the pressure was on at that point, and we were just having a good time playing loads of gigs.
Yeah.
We'd and just still getting used to the idea of having a manager, having a tour manager, having a tour bus, and these. The dream was always when we'd be practicing before we ever got anywhere.
Yeah.
And the dream was always just to be traveling around on a tour bus from town to town and playing gigs, and it came true. It does come true for some people, you know what I mean?
It does, yeah.
And it was fucking brilliant.
I'd say so. But just say when you got together first, was there like a prevailing direction, or did you all just throw everything in and Lego and build your own?
No, I'd say it was interesting because 2 of us came myself and Colin, the bass player, we were much more sort of indie type direction, and Dara, the drummer, and Billy, the guitarist, they were much more from a kind of a heavier sort of Metallica, that kind of side of things. So that's I would have written most of the songs and the melodies and all that kind of stuff. So melody was a big thing for me. So
yeah,
that's how we kind of got our sound wasn't like strict. There was a lot of melody in what we did, which was very important. So they've kind of brought the heaviness, and I sort of brought the melody to the whole equation. If you can hear that.
Yeah, that's always what worked. It was like a perfect balance, you know. And like the first time I heard On the Turn, I just like the riffs and the guitar sound was huge, but at the same time the hooks as well. It was just like a perfect storm. Like, but was that?
Yeah, the hooks are very important to me. Like, you know, I as were the riffs and all that. But you generally would do. We often would write a song or put a song together without any vocal melody or anything on it. The song would be finished, and then I would we would have a rough recording of the song, and I would sing. I would create the whole melody for the song on top of that. We'd have the choruses and the verses and everything done, and then I would do something completely from scratch. It sometimes often didn't come together at the same time, which made it fucking impossible to sing and play at the same time too, because they were often they would often be going against each other, and they wouldn't be hugely logical sometimes, you know.
Yeah, was that like was that a huge factor in writing On the Turn? Like, was there a say set direction for you there?
Yeah, well, I think On the Turn, if things had been differently, David, I would say on the Turn should have been our first album, really, ideally, because we were only finding our feet with the debut Kerbdog album. We didn't really know fully what direction we were going in. And it was only in the latter songs, like, say, I don't know if you know Dry Riser and the End of Green, which were much more melodic kind of tunes. That was more of a direction we were heading in with On the Turn. And on the Turn, like, for want of a better expression, is a much more poppier, it's a much more accessible album.
It is.
There's songs you can sing along to. I had developed a lot more as a songwriter, as it were, instead of just writing riffs for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And so I think if that had been our introduction to the world, things probably would have been different for us, because you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I think a lot of people got their first impression of what we were from our first album, but I don't think that truly was who we were. On the Turn is who we were as a band.
Yeah, no, the difference between those albums is pretty stark, you know.
Yeah,
like you could play certain songs from each of them back to back, and you wouldn't think it was the same band, you know. So
no, yeah, I'd agree with you. Yeah, that would be the case. On the Turn wasn't an extension of the first album. No. It was a totally different record altogether.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Do you remember like the planning for, say, the recording itself? I'm just looking at it from, say, my point of view of like, okay, yeah, we're going over there to do this, you know?
Well, for On the Turn, well, we so like we kind of wisened up, and we realized that we really had to big time in terms of making we wanted to make our music more accessible. We wanted to be big, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not lie about that, but we also wanted to be big but maintain credibility and not completely sell out. And, you know, we still wanted our music to be very heavy but melodic and accessible, but without kind of like completely turning into some I don't know, like I don't know what kind of band I'm looking for, but like losing ourselves completely. And that's it's a very fine line to tread, to try and do all of those things at once, and also, you know, want to become successful and sell, you know, shitloads of records. But that's what we tried to do with On the Turn. That was the plan. And so we hired this house in Wexford when we'd finished with the first album tours and all that stuff. And so that's what I set about then, writing songs with an awful lot more melody, and that were a lot more immediate, and the hooks were, to me the hooks were very, very important. That there was the hairs in the back of your neck, the hairs in the back of your neck were meant to stand up when you heard the changes in the songs and stuff like that, and that's what we tried to do. And everything went up a level. The production, where we did it, the studio, the producer, the amount of money spent on it, everything. Well, that went through the roof altogether. That was fucking savage. Carry on. The money spent on making that record is ridiculous.
Oh, right. Now, where did you track that? I know Kerbdog fucking fans are going to be like, you don't know, but just where
it's what happened, we did it. A producer called, he calls himself Gareth. Gareth Richardson is his name, and he had done a couple of records that we admired. Obviously, the biggest one he done up to that point was the first Rage Against the Machine album.
Yeah,
which sounds fucking awesome.
Even now, it does.
Even now, it sounds like the future.
Yeah, it does.
It's one of those records that sounds like the future. Yeah. Strangely, but that was it. So we sent him our demos. We didn't think he'd be interested because he was dealing with bands at that level, and but he liked it. So he came over to Kilkenny, met us, got on with us very well. And so the idea would have been we would probably recorded it in Dublin or London or somewhere this side of the pond.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, his daughter was quite ill.
Oh.
He had a brand new daughter, and she needed to have some quite serious surgery. So he wanted to be in America. So we had to go out through some difficult circumstances with him. Fortunately for us, I suppose, we ended up out in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And and he liked to use this, where the Rage album was done. It's called Sound City, which is actually, there's a what's his name? Dave Grohl did a documentary about it.
Oh, he did.
Nirvana did. Yeah, Nirvana did Nevermind there, and there's lots of legendary albums done there, especially Nevermind, because that was mad. It wasn't that long before we were in there that they recorded that. So we ended up there. Meant to be there for like 6 weeks, and he was very because we weren't the best players in the world, because we're not LA musicians.
Yeah.
Again, we're a bunch of blokes from Kilkenny, and so he required a level of perfection which was very, very high. So when we recorded all the songs, we recorded everything very quickly. But then he said, "Right, lads, now you can fuck off for a few weeks. I'm going to edit everything." And he edited fucking everything on 2-inch tape, himself and his assistant engineer, and spent like 5 or 6 weeks editing stuff down while we just fluted around Los Angeles, drinking and having a fucking good laugh. So we ended up spending over 4 months there in a couple of studios in LA with Garth, and that was even before mixing it.
Oh my god!
And that was it. So that was that done. And so we went home then in October. We were there from July to October, and then this album cost 500,000 sterling to make in 1995, which is a lot of money.
I don't want to adjust that for inflation now.
I know exactly. I think I did it recently. It's
God!
About 1.3 or something million.
Oh my god!
Was what it cost to make in today's money. But you wouldn't be surprised. Like, we were in that studio. That studio's being used day after day. Garth was an expensive producer. We were flying all over the place, and getting picked up in limos and all this kind of fucking mad shit. And I'm being put up in fancy apartments for months on end with loads of spending money. And then so we got back, and the album was to be mixed. Garth didn't want to mix it because he didn't rate himself as a mixer. Oh. So we ended up getting it ended up being mixed. Two different people. We didn't like the mixes of the guy who mixed it first. He did about 5 or 6 or 7 songs. A guy called Alan Moulder.
Foo Fighters, I think he did. Didn't he?
He's probably done that. Nine Inch Nails.
No, Nine Inch Nails. I'm thinking of Adam Casper.
Oh yeah. And, but he had recently mixed Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. So like he was a big deal at the time as well.
Yeah.
He's a big deal. He's a brilliant engineer and producer and mixer. We just didn't like what he did on the turn because he just put too much processing on it as far as we were concerned. So we said, no, we don't like it. Let's get someone else to do it. But this is like the cash register is just, the money's going fucking mad. So the record company are still throwing money at this.
Oh God.
So, and in the end, we got it mixed by a guy called Joe Barisi. I don't know if you know him. He did a lot with Queens of Stone Age and Tool. So he's done the last couple of Tool albums.
Sweet.
But so he came over and he mixed the album over here, actually back in Rockfield Studios in Wales, and that was the end of it then. So you can see how we'd spent so much money on making that record. So if you break it down, each track on the album, in today's money, about over 100,000 each track to produce and mix. That's fucked.
It is. Oh my God.
I mean, you'd make like 1,000 albums these days.
You would, yeah. Money, Like the last album I did was 10 tracks in 2 weeks for $5,000, and I did that in Denmark.
There you go. Yeah.
With like a Grammy nominated producer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it sounds amazing, right?
It sounds okay. Sorry.
Sure it does. But you can. No. You can make things now for.
You can, yeah.
Like it's lovely using a big studio. It's lovely using all that 2-inch tape and all that analog stuff and Neve desks and massive SSL desks but that you just don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah,
but that's what we did.
Actually, I don't know if I was going to ask you, but like, say a lot of bands now record remotely. Like say for example, like last summer I did an EP where I did all my tracks in this room, and like I sent the stems off and I got them reamped, and like none of us actually recorded in the same room. Like, what do you think of that? Like, or would you prefer having the lads in there together in the studio working on the same thing?
Well, of course, like everybody. I don't know, unless you absolutely hate the people you're working with. I think being in the same room is, we're human beings. That's what we're meant to do.
Yeah,
we're meant to be we're social animals. We're meant to be. And there's what you get in a room. You have a lot of nonverbal communication. There's vibes. There's an atmosphere. There's the room. You being there physically in the same room together brings a lot of intangibles to it.
Exactly.
Whether that makes a huge difference to what comes out in the end, I don't know, but it certainly makes the experience more real and there's more soul involved.
It does. It gives an album a personality, I think.
It does, and needs most COVID and people living separately and all that kind of stuff, and it does make things easier, and you can make records by recording your own parts and sending them off and putting it all together like a jigsaw puzzle on Pro Tools. But ultimately, I think anyone would say they would prefer to be in the same room tracking an album together at the same time.
That's it. I mean, like a lot of times now you'll hear the same Kemper profiles for guitars, and a lot of albums have the same guitar tone, but what makes the guitar tone is the studio, the amp, the guitar, the player, all these things together, and that's what makes it sound like no one else's album.
Well, that's it, because I can only hark back to my own experience. We're making On the Turn. We went, myself and Garth, producer, we went down to, in Los Angeles, they have fucking everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we just went down and hired literally 20 different types of amplifier. Swear to God. And we had them all. They were all set up in the studio with mics on them all.
Oh my God.
So there was the Marshalls. I had my own Mesa Boogie, Marshalls, Fenders, everything, Rolands, Fender Twins, fucking Vox, AC30s, every amp you can imagine, all mic'd up, and it was just fucking hell, and just switching between them all, and it was just like, this is just fucking insane.
No need for it.
Like, no need for it at all. But it was great to do. It was a great experience. Like at one stage, I swear to God, there was an Australian guy there, and he was literally hired every day to sit beside me and tune my guitar for me between takes. I would sit there, hand him the guitar. He would tune it on one of these fucking fancy oscilloscope tuners and hand it back to me. And this seemed normal. Oh man, it's fucking crazy.
Was there any moment over there where you're like, it sets in, you're like, what am I doing here? You know?
Oh yeah, big time, all the time.
I don't think
the time,
because I don't think an Irish band has done what you've done since. You know, go to LA, do an album. You know,
I don't think so. I think that, like, I think in the era when record companies were making CDs for 10p or 10 cents and selling them for 25 quid, they were making fucking bananas amounts of money, the record companies at that time. And they just had so much money to spend because the tax man would get it otherwise. So young bands that they would sign, they'd just let them spend loads and loads of money, right? Because it just write it off in tax. So they could do it. They could afford to do that with bands like us and send us away and, you know, go off and spend £1 million there. But in the end, they are banks really, and they want to make their money back. So that's when the pressure is on, when you start releasing singles and, you know, they're not performing as they would like. And when when On the Turn eventually came out, the whole landscape had changed. Britpop was happening, big style. So you know, we needed to sell a fucking shitload of albums to justify the existence of it, you know.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen. It got released. Luckily, it got released. I know plenty of bands who did the same sort of thing, and their album never got released at all.
Oh, really? And like, they're probably still
totally
expensive in the courts to get them back, kind of thing.
Oh, they're just there. You'll never get them back. They're just left on a shelf.
Jesus.
Left on a shelf, and they will never see the light of day ever.
I wonder, is that a new business opportunity for someone to buy all these albums and then release them?
Yeah, well, I suppose that there probably would be, but you know, obviously, record companies own the masters of these things.
Yeah, but I have heard of people buying masters of albums and, you know, licensing them and stuff like that. But I think that's a bit cruel. Yeah. That's a bit cruel, to be honest. If you can give it back to a band, why not? Like,
I think we tried to buy On the Turn back off them so we could hawk it to other labels when they dropped us, but they weren't into that. They weren't up for it, you know. Or what we're looking for was just extortionate amounts of money. We could never have afforded it. They may have been looking for, you know, the 500 grand or something like that. So I don't know. I wasn't part of that detail.
Yeah, I'd say you were probably burnt out of it at that stage. You're just me.
I never paid any attention to any of that stuff, you know, stupidly.
Yeah, but I think I saw an interview and he did like one tour for On the Turn.
Yeah, like, one proper tour. Yeah, that was kind of it really. It came out in April.
Yeah,
and we toured for about 3 months. And that was kind of it.
Yeah. What would be the, like, did you gig with any like bands that you're like, what are we doing gigging with this band? Is there any like random?
Well, one of our heroes, and you can hear their influence on our albums, is Helmet, the band Helmet. So we got to tour with them, and just playing with them every night was around Europe. That was one of the high points. But we did sporadic gigs where we played with Foo Fighters and
that's cool,
and bands like that. But I think playing with them, because we used to just watch them every night in awe.
Yeah.
And they were total heroes to us. Of course, we couldn't let them know that, but they were absolute heroes. And we just was that was, in terms of touring, that was kind of probably the high point for me. Watching
Page Hamilton,
them every night.
Page is such a nice guy. I've met him a couple of times. Like, he'll like stand there and talk to everybody after a gig as well. Well, the gig I was at anyway.
Where was that? In Soho Music Centre, was it?
Yeah. No, when was the last place I saw them? Whelan's, about maybe 4 years ago, maybe.
Wow. Yeah, because like when we were playing with Helmet, they were playing in places with 3,000 and 4,000 people
I
in
know.
Germany and stuff,
he,
you know.
he didn't seem to mind. You know.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know, every band has its day, you know.
This is true. But this was an awesome chat. Where am I going to bring it? I remember, yeah, in an interview I saw you do recently, you said you're talking about Wilt, and like you said it was essentially Kerbdog with like less gain on the guitars. But would you regain some of those songs and like distort the guitars up, use up on, and re-release them?
Yeah, well, no, I don't think so. I wouldn't re-release them or go back and
Or
do anything
even
like
just
that. But I
play
think
them?
that, yeah, I don't think so.
No.
I think about Kerbdog, for fans of the band, they seem to hold us in this kind of magical regard, and especially on the turn.
Yeah.
And I think Wilt never, although you know, Wilt, I think what we did was quite good, you know.
Me too.
But
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks. But like it never had that. It never kind of had we never had a religious kind of following with Wilt. We kind of do with Kerbdog, you know.
You do.
But I think it was a bit of a mistake. Like I after Kerbdog, I thought, like, you know, we weren't finished. I wasn't finished anyway. I still wanted to have it go, and I thought I was a reasonably good songwriter. And so I thought by turning down the amps, it would open us up to a whole new world. But I think probably in retrospect that was a mistake. I think maybe we should have turned the amps up more, maybe, because
double down.
Yeah, exactly. It was basically Kerbdog light. Wilt was. So maybe that was a mistake, but that's what I did at the time, and you know, it didn't happen for us in the way I would have hoped, but that's just the way it rolls, you know.
It was still fun to listen to. I mean, I had the album and a couple of singles. What I really enjoyed was the way you had the singles, the way you had like, see the way it's like half plastic.
Oh yeah,
I really enjoyed that. That was such a good idea. Yeah.
They were nice. Yeah, there was nice. The products were nice when they brought them out. You know, they were kind of there was lovely design involved. There were a lovely bunch of people who worked at that label. You know, they had a lot of soul, and they were into the creative side of things. You know, they weren't one of, you know, a big faceless corporation which we had been working with before. Having said that, there was nice people in there as well. Don't get me wrong.
There always isn't, and they're gone. That's from what I hear about labels, is that they restaff very quickly. You know, the people that might have signed to it be gone within a couple of years, even.
Oh, very much so. And that can have a effect on the bands that are, if they're just emerging, you know, people don't want to take other people's projects on because you didn't discover them. So you don't have as much love for them. And so that happens to a lot of bands. But look, we got two albums out. That's a lot better than a lot of bands, actually. You know, I know, as I was saying to you earlier, I know bands that would have signed to major labels and they got 1 or 2 singles out, and everything else was shelved after that. And nothing ever happened. And they were bound into these contracts that they couldn't get out of. And yet their label wouldn't release anything by them. They'd say, we don't hear a single, we don't hear, you know, go back and record some more. And nothing ever happened. And it's an awful situation to be in.
It is, yeah. I remember my old band did a gig with a English band called Raging Speedhorn, and they were selling bootleg copies of their own album at the venue, so they could get the money from the label.
Yeah, I remember Raging Speed. They were probably signed to a major label too, aren't they?
Initially, yeah. I'm not sure anymore.
Back in the day, like.
And they're still going. They're still playing.
Yeah. So you just copy your own album and sell them at the gigs.
Yeah, like they literally photocopied it. Like.
Yeah, well, fuck it. I think they're dead right.
That's kind of punk rock, though. That's kind of cool.
It's punk rock. It's what you got to do. You know, you have to pay for petrol to get to the next town.
Oh, don't talk about petrol costs. Jesus. Have you seen that? Oh, God.
Yeah, of course I have, yeah. I drive a Vespa. I don't care. I have to put seven quid a week into my petrol. I'm all right. I'll just survive.
Yeah, diesel SUV here.
Yeah, no, well, you've got a problem.
Sorry. Yeah, I live half an hour from anywhere, but
well,
I'm not going to ask the new music question. You what?
A lot of noise where you are then.
Oh, I can. The only thing that will hear me is cows in the next field. That's all. But no, I'm not going to ask the new music question because that's boring. But like, what do you think of, say, bands that would just release singles along the way instead of a full album?
The way things are at the moment,
Hmm.
I understand it. You know, if you want to make a living in a band, if you want it to be your life, um, you have to work. The only way to make a living now is by playing live, as far as I can see,
Yeah.
selling merchandise. It's not by selling records anymore. Like a record now is not. You can't make money on recordings. They're only promotional devices for people to come and see you,
Yeah.
and that's the only stream of revenue for bands now. And people like live music, and people like getting out to see bands. So the idea of releasing songs on a sporadic basis is something I can understand why bands do, because it's expensive going in if you want to record a full album and
Yeah.
put it out there. But if you release songs one at a time, you can keep you can do it in a piecemeal kind of way and play gigs, record some more, play gigs, record some more. It's just a whole different way of doing things.
Yeah.
Not, but nevertheless, I still think the album format is not dead,
Yeah.
because it's nice to sit down and listen to a bunch of songs that kind of all sort of at least relate to each other in some
Yeah.
way,
That's it. Like it's
rather than a bunch of a bunch of singles.
yeah, and each single will have a
Um,
different vibe to the next one, and there's no
I
continuity
don't
there
know.
really.
Yeah, there's no continuity. There's no story. It's not a body of work, but it's kind of, it's very hard for, as I said, to just go in and record an album and start picking tracks off that to release.
Yeah.
When you could be doing things a lot more efficiently, and at least if you get playing live, instead of spending 6 months or a year writing and recording an album.
Hmm.
I don't think that luxury is there for 99% of bands anymore.
No, it's not. And you will have to do as much at home as you can. I just I feel bad for any band starting out now. With all that up against them.
It's very tough. It's very, very tough to. You have to do an awful lot more now to get noticed, because there's so many people can record on their at home. You really had to, say, in the 90s, before the people could record on laptops and so on. You had to save up money. You had to get loans. You had to do this kind of stuff. You really had to be committed to do it, to go to a studio to make a demo that sounded decent.
Yeah.
And now you can do that nearly for nothing. So you have people. There's so much more material out there now, because people could do it a lot easier with
Yeah.
with less commitment. So it's harder to get noticed, by DJs, by record companies, by people who would be willing to invest, or by just listeners. There's exponentially more music out there than there was when I was producing music.
Yeah. Well, it's like, where do we even start if you're just got a band together? Like how do you even begin to get noticed? I wouldn't know.
I don't know. I guess you still use some of the old traditional routes, and
Just throw enough crap at a wall and hope some of it sticks.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think trying to get some DJs interested in some specialist DJs, people like me, and eventually, it can sometimes filter through that way. And there are still record companies. There are record companies putting out records still. They don't not exist, and there's still an audience for bands.
Yeah.
But it's just, and you have to obviously be able to manipulate the internet now, as well as all the other conventional ways, and that takes a fair amount of creativity as well to get yourself noticed.
It does.
And you have to be fucking good.
Well, if we start off with that, then everything else just falls into place,
You have to be good, yeah. You can't arrive half formed. You have to be fucking good. The first time someone's hears you have to don't give them don't be given your half-baked developed ideas.
Yeah.
Give them, be fully formed. I think that would be my advice to somebody. be who you are, and then give it to somebody. Don't give them your work in progress, because, as I said earlier on, that you only get one chance to make a first impression, especially now.
Especially now, yeah. Well, dude, thank you for this chat, and I'm glad that the internet held up for the majority of it.
Yeah, it got better. It got better and better and better.
Yeah, don't move into the middle of nowhere if you plan on doing a podcast.
Well, I don't know. Why not? You should have brought me down. You should have brought me down in the helicopter, and we could have done it face to face.
We'll do it for round 2.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, fair enough.